Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining live on LinkedIn and everybody watching this later on a recording. Got a great webinar here for you today talking about everything you need to know about migrating to Experience by Kentico. A lot of great stuff on the agenda. Really looking forward to hearing our founder and CTO here at BlueModus, Dave Conder, walk us through this. Please ask questions as we go in the comments on LinkedIn. I will jump in where it makes sense while Dave's talking with the questions, and also at the end we can have some dedicated Q&A time. So please definitely let us know what we can help discuss as we go. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, potentially evening. Thank you all for joining. We're excited to talk about this one. This is an important topic for us and our clients and the work we're doing. And what we wanted to do today is really talk about what we're kind of calling internally our migration playbook for migrating from previous versions of Kentico Xperience to the new platform called Experience by Kentico. And actually, a lot of the things we talk about today actually do apply to other platforms as well, but our main focus is going to be on specifically the Kentico Experience by Kentico platform. So a couple things just to kind of cover here at the beginning is, why now? Like, why is it time to migrate to the new platform? We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think one of the drivers behind it is the landscape changes on the Microsoft and the .NET side of things that have really been driving these changes for the last, say, 5 years or so, even potentially longer. I'll kind of talk about Kentico's strategy on this because I think it's really important to see how they're using this opportunity, this challenge, effectively that we have in front of us, to actually leapfrog and get ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. So we're excited about that. And then we're going to talk about, after we kind of go through our approach and everything, really thinking about the different options we have. And maybe, I'm sure many of you are in different stages of thinking this through, what this migration could look like. I'm going to talk about maybe some ideas for steps to take to get started and how to get that planned out so that you have an effective strategy for a good migration, which is going to be really important. So before we get started, I think this is useful. We see quite a few of our clients in these three categories. I think every situation is unique, so it's not going to be a perfect match. But generally speaking, we're going to see some combination of these categories. So the first being, I love my website and I manage it. I can't wait to see new features. It's going to just make us more efficient, more productive. And if you're in that kind of situation and things are going really well, then this is just a content migration for the most part, and this is a pretty straightforward process. If you're more in the kind of the middle and you love the website and everything, but it's difficult to manage, you have a lot of questions around maybe how the content model is structured, is it really working for you and your different channels, that kind of thing. Then there's an opportunity here when we're looking at a migration, there's a huge opportunity to improve the authoring experience and just make the platform work better for you. So there's an opportunity, as we do that, when you're under the hood, it's the best time to make changes. And so maybe consider that kind of approach. And we do have clients, unfortunately, it happens, we get asked to jump in and support, websites that have been built and they're just not working well at all. Like a lot of times it's front end issues, back end issues, content issues, integrations, you name it. So in those kinds of scenarios, what's probably a little bit more strategic approach is to really consider this more of a rebuild or relaunch, where you can really leverage what you can and minimize that effort, but really consider what look at it more like a full redesign relaunch. So as you're thinking through, have a think about what's working. I think that's an important step. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. But just what's working, what's not working. Is your content working, or is the code working? Is the front end working? Is the authoring experience, integrations? All these things are important, and it's really key to understand where you're at so you can get a good strategy moving forward. Now, some of you probably have seen the newer versions of Experience by Kentico. I did want to show just a very brief demo. There's a couple of features that I think are really powerful in the platform itself. And I do want to spend just a moment kind of showing some of those powerful features. We have this Kentico demo site called Dancing Goat. Now, we have a lot of client sites on Experience by Kentico already. And unfortunately, though, they're usually covered by NDAs and privacy, so we don't share those publicly, but this is a good example site. You can install this very quickly if you get your developers up and running. You can usually have this up and running in about 5 minutes. if you wanted to play with it. But what I really want to talk about, and I'm not going to
You
go
gonna make it a little bigger, Dave. Sorry, on
oh,
the
sure,
screen. Keep going.
sure. Yeah. So I'm not going to talk too much about the platform itself. That's not really the focus here. It's a great platform. Um, One of the things that I do think is worth mentioning is that Kentico basically rebuilt their platform from scratch. When the changes in the Microsoft stack have been happening, they looked at it as an opportunity to build things from scratch and use modern technologies across the board. So for example, the admin interface you see here is all based on React. One of the cool things about it though is you can actually extend it without knowing React. You don't have to have React developers. You just have .NET developers that build modules in Kentico, and then that's translated to React, which is really nice. But one of the things they're really focused on is productivity and efficiency, clicking and waiting for screens and all that. They've really tried to make the entire process much more snappy and efficient. Um, One of the other things that they kind of looked at is just the whole concept of content modeling itself, and so they have this idea of channels. A channel could be a website, a microsite, a email, campaign. It could be headless content. There's a lot of different ways to look at channels, but within channels themselves, you have you can basically categorize your content and for different audiences or different platforms that that content's being delivered. The most traditional kind of consistent channel we can think about is a website. So in this case, you can see a familiar tree in the admin here with products and landing pages and all that kind of stuff. You're also going to get all of the power that you had before with the page builder and widgets, the ability to, you know, um, make modifications to widgets, add layouts, change the page template that you're using, all those kinds of things. Those are all easy to do. They're very similar to the previous version. They're just enhanced and cleaned up quite a bit. So all those features are still there. You still have the ability to modify content and things like that. But maybe some other examples to show really quick is a lot of times when you're linking content to pages and things like that. A lot of times you want to create that content in real time. So for example, if I had this banner in the past, maybe you'd have to create a banner, go find it, link to it, that kind of thing. Here you can select the banners that exist, but you can also create new ones on the fly inline here. So for as that example, you can much more quickly build pages because you don't have to go around the tree to different places. So a lot of the concepts are very similar, but they've really focused on basically the UX, the UI, and just the overall experience of how efficient it is. In addition, they've gone a further step, which we're excited about because this is really a game changer for a lot of our clients. And that's the idea of the content hub. So the content hub is essentially all content, which can include pages. But we all know that a lot of times content itself is not really hierarchical. It's not really part of a tree or things like that. So, for example, maybe um, a banner for or a social link or something. That's not a page. You're not going to have a page for that. So, to enhance the content management abilities of the platform, they built this content hub, which is very useful because you can build filters and find the content, go and filter it out. But some of the really cool features that we love are things like smart folders, where you can devise these folders that are logical groupings of content based on rules that you set. So, for example, you could say certain types of content, status, and different drafts, published status, whether or not they have certain taxonomies or if they're behind a login, the last modified date, that kind of thing. So you can see recently modified content or content in the draft status, or maybe you can have content that's tied to a specific set of taxonomies. That makes it really easy to find this stuff. And so, um, we have some clients with many, tens of thousands of pieces of content, and we're able to manage that here effectively in the system. You still have traditional folders as well. If you wanted to create a folder that's a kind of a hierarchical folder structure, you can do that and place the content there as well. So you have a lot of options. You have the tree itself, you have these smart folders, you have traditional folders. But the main point is that all this content can be used in different widgets and different pages. It can be linked, it can be just, outputted via API. There's just a tremendous amount of flexibility in that. One final thing is just to point out too is the ability to do things like create specific versions of content, so like content personalization and A/B testing and all that. Um, Very commonly done. In this case, for example, maybe I have two versions of this particular widget, one for returning visitors, one for the original, and you can do all of this without developers. So once you get the rules set up, you can have the marketing automation tools give you the flexibility to actually build out pages and layouts and widgets and have them personalized and targeted to the audience that you want them to be. So about as deep as we're going to go today. But if you'd like a more detailed demo or overview of the platform, we'd be more than happy to do that. We're very excited about the platform itself. We think it's going to be basically its capabilities is one of the big reasons we're excited about this entire topic that we're talking about today. All right, so I'm going to continue on. Talk just a little bit about the history and why this is happening. We get a lot of questions from our clients. Why is this migration happening? And at the end of the day, I think the simple answer is that Microsoft has made changes in the last few years that have really necessitated this kind of change. Um, you may have heard, I'm sure many of you hear of the .NET platform. .NET is Microsoft's web development platform and Windows development platform that was first launched in 2001. So we're almost an entire generation past that. Um, the traditional sort of legacy tool was called .NET Framework, and it was officially launched in 2002, but it was actually in production in many cases in 2001. And you can see in this timeline here, over the years they've added new features, but effectively almost 10 years ago they kind of landed at the final status of the .NET framework. They've made some incremental changes since then, but 4.8 is actually the last version that Microsoft's committed to releasing. So effectively, the .NET framework is obsolete. It's an old platform. There are many millions of applications that run on it, so Microsoft will support it in the sense that it'll be part of the Windows platform. So if you have Windows 11, you're going to have .NET framework. It's part of the core of Windows. But from a web development perspective, it's essentially dead. And another thing that's important is that getting talent and developers who work in this platform is very difficult because it is obsolete. It's like cold fusion. It's something that people don't want to work in, and it's not great for careers. So effectively, it's just a dead platform, and we have to look at it from that perspective. So everything that's built in the .NET framework needs to be moving to the .NET Core, or just now they just call it .NET framework, which, as you can see, the first version released .NET 6 in 2021, and they're releasing a new version every single year, alternating long-term support and standard term support, patches for 36 months for long-term support. So in a few weeks, we're going to get the latest version of .NET 8. I'm sorry, .NET 9 is going to come out, and that's going to be the standard term. And we're currently under the .NET 8 regime, which is long-term support. The main point of all this is that this necessitated a change, and this is something that's universal in the entire marketplace of the .NET, CMS, DXP ecosystem. And I think one of the things that Kentico really focused on is they looked at this as an opportunity to start from scratch, to do it from the ground up the right way. A lot of the other platforms are essentially painting the ship while it's at sea, which is a good strategy in a lot of ways, but they're not necessarily taking leaps and bounds above what the platform used to be. And so from our perspective, we look at Kentico and we're excited because we think it does a good job of basically starting from scratch. They said, what would a brand new modern DXP look like on the latest and greatest technologies, and security, front end, everything. And that's what Experience by Kentico is. So from our perspective, it's like essentially setting us up for the future. It's a future forward platform that's modern in every way. Okay, so we're going to talk about the options we have in order to migrate. So if you're on an existing Experience by Kentico Xperience application, say 13, 12, 11, whatever, we do have some great options. One of the things Kentico realized is that pretty much all of their clients are going to need to migrate at some point. And so they've really invested heavily in what they're calling the toolkit approach. And this is great because we basically have options for almost any scenario we run into. So first of all, the main toolkit is the Kentico toolkit. The migration toolkit itself is designed to go from a previous version of Kentico to the new one. But they've also invested in a Sitefinity and Sitecore toolkit that would allow you to migrate natively from a Sitecore or Sitefinity application, and basically using this tool, make it simple and easy, relatively speaking, to get that content structured properly into Kentico. And then finally, they have this, what they're calling the universal migration toolkit. And this tool could be used for anything. And we'll talk about some examples of what that might look like. Now we've been involved in some of the development and support of these toolkits. They're open source. They're available on GitHub, and so they're a great resource for developers to figure out a really low friction path to get content migrated between different versions, different systems into Experience by Kentico. So for example, this universal migration toolkit, you could pull content from like even open source PHP, WordPress type things, or even something like an AEM. But what we're seeing, and this is kind of interesting and exciting in a lot of ways, is we have some projects that we've been working on where we're pulling content from ERPs and PIMs and other systems that are completely non-CMS systems and able to use this standard format to operate the migration so that we can get it into Kentico in a structured way. So even I think the key takeaway here is that this does not have to even be a CMS. These toolkits will allow us to pull content from anything and then get that content structured in a way that you can actually use it in management and manage it in your DXP. So the toolkit itself, it's basically designed to pick up all the pieces that you have. So you have your content, your page types, the widget content, a lot of the other elements like forms, those kinds of things. All of that will be able to be migrated fairly simply. And I say relatively simply, of course, because every project is unique. But you can migrate those essentially natively from Kentico 11, 12, and 13 if you're on the MVC platform. So that actually goes back quite a ways in terms of years. Kentico 12, for example, was released in 2018. So that's 6 years ago. Kentico 11 was prior to that. So if you're on MVC currently, if your front end is MVC, you actually can use this toolkit today to migrate to Experience by Kentico. And in an edge case, if you have even older versions of 10, which goes way back, and you're on Portal Engine, there are some flows you can go through, some steps you can take to actually get it to the point where you can migrate it. I'll talk about that here in a sec. And essentially, the toolkit's designed for you to build the rules so you can do the migration and duplicate your content model. It also has the ability to do some things a little bit more custom, and I'll talk about that in a sec too. So a lot going on here, but just to kind of highlight, if you're on Kentico 10, for example, which is Portal Engine only, you can upgrade to Kentico 11, upgrade to Kentico 12, use a tool that was an open source tool by Trevor Fayez, and he built this that basically migrates Portal Engine to MVC. And then from there, you can go to Experience 13, and then from there, you can go to Experience by Kentico. Or more likely, you're on MVC already, so you're on Kentico 12, 13, or 11, 12, or 13, in which case you can essentially natively use this migration toolkit to Experience by Kentico. So we have a lot of options. Obviously, the devil's in the details of how that works, but that's going to be unique to each project. But the main point I hope you all can see is that there is a set of tools that will allow us to do this and in a fairly straightforward manner without a lot of custom development. It's really the toolkit does most of the heavy lifting of transforming that content into the new system. There's a couple of newer features I just mentioned, and this is things. It's called the extensions project that was just released a couple weeks ago, and this allows things to do things like merging multiple content types into a single content type, and using the new reusable schemas, which is a way to have common sets of fields across different content types. And all of these features are essentially native now to the tool. So just following the process of configuring the tool, you can do a lot of these more advanced scenarios. So we're excited about that, and we're already starting to use these. Now, a couple other things I want to mention too is internal tooling that we have, and we love Kentico. We do a lot of work in the Kentico space, and so it's important for us. We've made a lot of investments to make sure we have a good tool set to help streamline these migrations as much as possible. So we have a tool called Elevate, which is something that it's an internal tool. It's not something that we're looking at as a product. It's just sort of a toolkit that we use internally. And what this is designed to do is, while the Kentico migration toolkits do a great job of getting the content and the data moved over in a structured way, a lot of times the code itself has to change quite a bit too, because especially if we're going from .NET Framework to .NET Core, there's a lot of changes in the code. But even from Experience 13 to Experience by Kentico, you essentially have different API calls. There's things that are slightly different. And so what Elevate is an AI-driven tool that uses Roslyn, which is Microsoft's compiler tools, and AI to essentially automate the majority of that work. And this is exciting. This is something I've been able to be heavily involved in lately, and it's a lot of fun. And we're finding that our goal of 80% is pretty reasonable. That we can essentially get 80% of that code automated. So that's something we're working on. I think no matter what path you take, you're going to want to have some opportunities to automate as much as you can to keep that process simple and safe. Another set of tools that we're bringing to the table internally is what we call Blue Wave, and essentially it's basically extending ChatGPT functionality into platforms really easily. And these are core content tools. And the system has a built-in crawler, so it can take the holistic content on a page that may include widgets, things like that, and include that in as it does its work. But it'll do things like auto tagging and taxonomy for new content, image recognition for alt tags, readability, sentiment analysis, additional metadata and summaries, things like that, translation, transliteration, and all kinds of other interesting things. We have about 15 different use cases for this tool. Um, Now, Kentico, Experience by Kentico, they're adding AI features. As they continue to roll out this versionless approach, they just keep adding features constantly, and eventually, I think they'll have a lot of great integrated AI features. But we see a lot of need for our clients to have pretty advanced, complex scenarios with AI, and so we've really invested a lot in the last 2 years on this to bring this to the table. And Blue Wave is just a set of APIs that interact with ChatGPT on the Microsoft Azure platform. So it's pretty simple, but it's something that we can just plug in and very quickly get up and running on our clients' websites in the admin, and that helps a lot. Okay, so kind of pivoting here back to the original question of kind of where do we even begin on this? Um, we all know that every migration story, project, history is all going to be unique. So you're going to have your normal challenges, but we do have a kind of the handbook, kind of the plan that we've developed for migrations. And I think the most important thing is to audit your existing site to know where you're at. That's the most important step, essentially first step. Got to understand what your content looks like, what the content model looks like, how good that matches what your business needs. Like I said, just the ability to enhance and clean up and even generate content with AI tools. Generally speaking, what's working, what's not, and that can be from a front end perspective or a back end perspective. We find oftentimes that the authoring experience, if it's not really streamlined and efficient, you get less value out of the site because you simply can't do the things you want to do. You just don't have the time to do it. So what's working, what's not. Something I like to always look at is rot. So stuff, content or functionality that's redundant, outdated, or trivial. So find those things and identify what you want to actually move over because you don't want to, migrate things you don't need. Um, like I said, if you're under the hood and you're making, tinkering and doing a migration, that's a great time to look at other changes to the front end, for example, or the design. And like I said, just those authoring bottlenecks and inefficiencies. So as you kind of catalog all this, that'll help you set the stage for what those next steps are on the migration itself. There's a couple things you need to think about too, and that's um, we find that integrations and connection points, that's where a lot of, I would call them, breaking changes may occur, because if we're moving from the .NET framework universe to the .NET Core universe on the back end with integrations, a lot of times you have to update those integrations themselves because they have to be able to run on .NET Core natively, and so that could require some code changes. Anytime you have really unstructured or disorganized content models, that can be a pitfall because, for example, if most of your content is just WYSIWYGs, or just a bunch of widgets or web parts and it's not really structured, you can get that structured, but it might be a little bit more work to figure out how to map that appropriately. We have seen and will continue to see a lot of legacy dependencies in code. And so again, going to the .NET Core code base, you may have to consider if you have some old PDF generators or something that use, legacy .NET framework code, you may have to upgrade that or replace that with something else. And just your typical testing validation, how you want to do that, training and author support. And then finally, like I said, if you're already under the hood, that is a great time to look at other enhancements. So front end content functionality, whatever that may be. Um, And I think at the end of the day, the goal for us, for our clients, is always to provide the expert navigation that we can to help them think this through. The migration itself, obviously, is going to be a fairly complex process. No matter what tools you use, it can involve a lot of moving parts. Our goal and our focus is to help our clients understand that entire process. And so, um, I think if you go just going back here, just make sure that if you're not planning your migrations at this point in end of 2024, um, you probably need to really consider getting that process moving pretty quickly because um, you know the timing for the .NET framework support and all those kinds of things are dictating the end of life support for Kentico Experience 13. And those dates are coming. They're out there, and it's something that you have to be aware of, and you have to make sure you have your migration complete before those dates hit. So I want to call that out. If you haven't started this process, I'd highly recommend that you take a look at it because essentially the clock is ticking, and we need to be aware of that. All right, so that's going to wrap up this webinar. We do have a minute or two for any questions that maybe come up. But more importantly, I think, obviously it's kind of a half-hour webinar. It's kind of hard to get into the details and the weeds. Um, I would love the opportunity to help out any way I can. Our entire team is standing by. So you have my email address right there. There's a lot of different ways to contact us at BlueModus, but feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. I've been working on the platform for nearly 20 years, since 2006. So, and BlueModus is an agency. We're focused on Kentico. It's our primary platform that we do, across the board. So, we're standing by to help any way we can, even if it's just a discussion about ideas or thoughts or strategies. Our goal is to help this entire community and this platform grow and be successful, and we'd love any opportunity to help with that. So, I'll end it at that. Justin, I don't know if there's any questions that.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, thanks so much, Dave. Yeah. So last call for questions on LinkedIn. We don't have any yet, probably because the material was so clearly laid out, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
While we still have a minute or two here, I had something I wanted to bring up that you and I were talking about recently. So, with these toolkits that Kentico's invested in and the community is also invested in, there's opportunity because of the way they've been built, right? To use them even more than just one-time migrations, right? So you and I were talking about the universal toolkit, and you can even build features with this, right? That was a really cool idea, I thought.
Yeah, and that's actually we have an opportunity that we're already kind of thinking that through, and essentially is
Oh, you're
something you
muted,
can,
Dave. Good. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
There we go. Okay, sorry. Um, yeah, so basically the toolkits lay out the best practice for integrating and inserting content and mapping content, that kind of thing. And so the toolkit code itself can be used for integrations, and it's basically gives you a really good operational process to do, say, daily feeds, for your product, lineup or events or whatever from your ERP or your learning management system, whatever it may be. But these toolkits give you a really clear blueprint of exactly how you should do those kinds of integrations. And so we're going to actually be borrowing some of that code, and it's just establishing a better, more powerful integration process.
Very cool. Okay, we have a technical question here from Siddharth. Custom tables are obsolete in XYK. What could be an alternative?
Yeah, good question. So the custom table feature is removed, but essentially you can use module classes, which is the way you extend the admin interface. And module classes can have structured schemas that you control, and they can act like custom tables used to. And so they can store relational data and all those kinds of things, and you can use Kentico's APIs to access it. So it's effectively been replaced with module classes.
Great. I think we have another question coming in from Siddharth. Several other features like scheduled tasks, staging, document version history. So I think really I'll let Dave kind of take it, but my thought on this is with Experience by Kentico. There is a lot of thoughtfulness being put into the product that's not just necessarily one-to-one. Let's pull everything over the exact same way it is. It's more what are the business goals and what's the technical goal of these previous features in older versions of the platform, and making sure that's accounted for, maybe even in a better way. So I know staging is one example where there's a lot going on there. We're trying to figure out, I think, across the board, what's the best experience for a content author, and not necessarily what's the exact same experience we had in previous versions. Is that fair to say, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, like for example, staging, it's going to come in a different flavor, and it will be coming soon. It's a feature they're going to be releasing soon for you to promote content between environments, but it's going to be basically completely rewritten and massively improved. Things like scheduled tasks. Um, this is an area where Kentico's focused. They're focused on what they're good at and what the system can do. And there are many best in breed solutions for that, such as Hangfire or Azure queues and things like that. And so the recommendation is basically to leverage the best in breed tools for things like scheduled task, document versions, history, all that kind of stuff. That's coming as well. So that's actually on the roadmap, and it should be released in the next 6 months or less for all of these features. So definitely some features being removed in the sense that they're just not part of the core focus of the DXP. But the rest of them, like staging and versioning, that kind of thing, those are coming and they'll be here very soon.
Cool. All right. So no more questions right now, but as Dave mentioned, please reach out to us, bluemodus.com. Feel free to email Dave. You can always reach out on LinkedIn as well. But we'll leave it there for now. And thanks so much for attending, everyone, live, as well as watching this later on. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Dave, for a great set of content here.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. And happy, like I said, happy to chat. So feel free to reach out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.